A city for 20,000 people exists where no city should. Deep beneath the plains of Turkey, the ancient metropolis of hides a story of survival carved from pure dread. By the end of this journey, you will understand how an entire civilization prepared for the end of their world. What kind of threat forces people to abandon the sun for a life in the rock? And what can their desperate ingenuity teach us about our own fears? What does it mean to build a future in the dark? The ground itself held the first clue. To understand the city buried beneath, you must first see the impossible landscape that cradles it. Cappadocia feels less like a part of our world, and more like a dreamscape carved from stone. Its most famous features are the fairy chimneys, whimsical towers of rock that rise from the earth like giant stone mushrooms or weathered chess pieces. They look like the work of some playful giant, but their origin is far more violent. Millions of years ago, massive volcanoes blanketed this entire region in a deep, soft layer of ash. This ash compacted into a rock called tuff. Then, wind and water began their slow, patient work, sculpting the soft tuff away, leaving behind these resilient caps of harder basalt stone perched atop the softer pillars. This process created a surreal, porous landscape, a honeycomb of natural caves and canyons. For any civilization looking at this terrain, the message was clear. The earth here was not solid, it was soft. It was workable, and it was full of hiding places. This unique geology presented an opportunity unlike any other. Imagine having a building material that required no quarrying, no not a small cellar or a storage niche. As he and others ventured cautiously forward, they found themselves in a tunnel that branched, leading to rooms carved from the living rock, then to more tunnels, and then down via steep staircases to even more levels. They discovered strange circular doors made of heavy stone, like massive millstones, that could be rolled across passageways to seal them shut. They found ventilation shafts that dropped deep into the earth, still channeling fresh air. Word of the labyrinth beneath their homes spread quickly, transforming local shock into a global archaeological sensation. Here was an entire underground city, forgotten by time, its existence erased from common memory until a single mundane renovation cracked its seal. It was a powerful reminder that the past is never truly gone. It simply waits, silently, for a crack in the wall to tell its story again. The accidental discovery demanded answers. Who built this, and what were they so desperately trying to keep out? The numbers alone are difficult to grasp. 18 levels deep, a vertical city plunging over 200 feet into the earth. This was not a single shelter for a few families. It was a self-contained world built to sustain an entire population of 20,000 individuals for months, perhaps even years, completely cut off from the surface. To walk through its restored passages today is to witness an underground urban planning. The city was organized with a clear, practical logic. The upper levels were for public life and immediate refuge. Here you would find the large communal kitchens, with carved-out hearths and ventilation chimneys designed to draw smoke up and away. There were stables, with tethering rings carved directly into the rock walls and troughs for water, keeping precious livestock safe and nearby. Workshops for crafts, and wide rooms that likely served as gathering halls or schools, their ceilings blackened by the soot of countless oil lamps. As you descend, the atmosphere shifts. The passages narrow, becoming more easily defensible. You move into the residential districts, thousands of small, simple living quarters carved side by side, each a private cell for a family. Deeper still are the industrial heart and the city's lifelines. Massive circular wine and oil presses, their collection basins worn smooth by use, speak to a society that planned not just for survival, but for the preservation of culture and normalcy. Enormous storage rooms, some capable of holding grain supplies for the entire population, were sealed against dampness and pests. Dozens of ingeniously engineered ventilation shafts, some over 100 feet deep, ensured a constant supply of fresh air to even the lowest chambers, making the environment breathable and preventing stagnation. Perhaps most telling are the places of worship, small chapels with simple crosses carved into the walls. This was a community that intended to preserve its faith, its social structure, and its very identity in the darkness. The scale of this construction reveals a profound, collective commitment. This was not a project undertaken in a panic. It was a generational endeavor, a long-term insurance policy carved into the bedrock. The labor involved is almost unimaginable. Every room, every staircase, every storage bin and air shaft was painstakingly chiseled by hand, with simple metal tools, and the excavated rock had to be carried back to the surface. This represents thousands of person-years of work, a continuous investment spanning centuries. Such an immense undertaking required stable leadership, shared resources, and a unified, urgent purpose. A society does not pour this much of its energy and ingenuity into a hole in the ground unless it is convinced, beyond any doubt, that the world above is fundamentally, terrifyingly unsafe. The city itself is the artifact of a pervasive, enduring fear. But what exactly were the people so afraid of? What looming shadow justified turning their world upside down and moving it underground? Breathing was their first and most vital engineering challenge. A sealed stone tomb holding 20,000 people would become a death trap within hours, not from an enemy, but from the simple, silent exhaustion of air. The builders have understood this fundamental truth. Their solution was a masterpiece of invisible architecture, a network of more than 50 vertical shafts drilled straight through 200 feet of solid rock, connecting the deepest chambers to the open sky far above. Think of these shafts not as simple holes, but as the city's lungs. They worked on a beautifully simple principle of physics, the same one that allows a chimney to draw smoke. The air deep underground was cooler and denser, while the air at the surface, warmed by the sun, was lighter. This temperature difference created a constant, gentle draft, pulling stale air up and out while drawing fresh air down through other shafts in a continuous, life-giving cycle. It was natural air conditioning, engineered centuries before the concept had a name. But these shafts served a dual, equally critical purpose. Many of them extended down to the natural water table, functioning as incredibly deep wells. This meant that even during a prolonged siege, with the surface world cut off, the community below would not only have air to breathe but fresh water to drink. The system also solved the problem of daily life underground. The communal kitchens, with their ever-burning fires for cooking and warmth, would have filled the chambers with deadly smoke without an outlet. The ventilation shafts provided that escape route, channeling the smoke upward and away, keeping the living spaces clear. This attention to detail reveals a profound understanding of public health. They weren't just preventing suffocation, they were ensuring the air remained clean, preventing the buildup of moisture, mold, and unseen dangers. This level of subterranean planning demonstrates a technical sophistication that rivals the aqueducts of Rome or the plumbing of ancient Crete. It shows a civilization thinking not in terms of days or weeks, but of generations living in the dark. Their survival depended not on the strength of their walls alone, but on the ingenuity that kept the very atmosphere alive. A fortress is only as strong as its gates, and gates were designed to disappear. The city's most iconic and chilling defensive features are its massive, circular stone doors. Carved from a single, dense block of volcanic rock, these wheels stand as tall as a person and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. They were not hung on hinges. Instead, they rested within a carefully carved stone track, a smooth groove in the floor, allowing them to be rolled sideways across a corridor entrance with surprising ease from the inside. From the outside, however, they presented an impassable barrier of solid stone, seamlessly blending into the wall when closed. There was no handle, no lock to pick. The only way to open such a door was from within its protected side, making a forced entry a slow, noisy, and nearly impossible task for any attacker armed with the tools of the era. This was security in its most elemental form, a literal wall that could be moved into place with a collective shove. But the genius of these doors was not just in their brute strength. They functioned as internal bulkheads, strategically placed at key choke points throughout the city's descending levels. In the event of a breach, if attackers somehow made it past the first hidden entrance and into the upper tunnels, the defenders could retreat deeper, rolling these stone barriers shut behind them. Each sealed door created a new, smaller fortress, isolating the compromised section and forcing the enemy to start their assault all over again. This design reveals a mindset that anticipated the worst-case scenario. The builders were not just preparing for a raid at the surface entrance. They were planning for a prolonged, room-by-room battle in the dark, for the terrifying possibility that the sanctuary itself could be infiltrated. Every heavy stone wheel was a contingency plan, a way to buy time, regroup, and protect the community's core that lay deeper in the earth. It speaks to a profound, layered understanding of defense, where every corridor could become and every level its own citadel. The doors were more than barriers, they were a psychological declaration. Behind this stone, we are still safe, but air was only half of the equation for life in the deep. A community of 20,000 people needs an immense amount of water every single day, for drinking, for cooking, for the animals in their stables, and for the basic sanitation that prevents illness from spreading in close quarters. An enemy on the surface could easily poison a river or block access to a spring, turning a fortress into a tomb within days. The builders have solved this problem with the same elegant, direct logic they applied to everything. They went straight to the source. Scattered throughout the city's levels, they carved deep, narrow shafts that plunged straight down through the rock, not stopping at a cistern, but continuing until they struck the natural water table far below. These were not containers for rainwater. They were direct taps into Cappadocia's vast underground aquifers, a secret wellspring sealed within the mountain itself. This water was protected from surface contamination, from drought, and from any hostile hand. Its supply was limited only by the aquifer itself, which, fed by distant rainfall filtering slowly through the porous rock, was essentially renewable. The engineering implications are staggering. It meant that the duration of a siege was no longer dictated by how much water they could store in barrels. It was dictated by food. As long as the granaries held out, the city could endure, making it a truly closed-loop system. The presence of these deep wells also subtly shaped the environment. Water has a stable, cool temperature, and these constant sources helped regulate the humidity and temperature of the surrounding chambers, preventing the air from becoming too dry or the rock too cold. This was a holistic vision of survival, where every system supported another. The ventilation shafts brought in air, the wells provided water, and together they maintained a balanced, livable world in the absolute dark. With breathable air and endless water secured, the people had conquered the two most immediate threats to life. They had built not just a shelter, but a habitat. This level of preparation points to a threat so persistent, so omnipresent, that they felt the need to create an entire mirrored civilization beneath their feet. One that could function independently for what might have felt like forever. Yet a city cannot live on air and water alone. The true measure of purpose is found not in its granaries or wells, but in its spaces for the human spirit. Scattered throughout the labyrinth, archaeologists have uncovered large, open chambers, their ceilings higher and their floors more level than the cramped living quarters. These were the city's public squares, carved from darkness. Here, in the flickering lamplight, the community would have gathered. These rooms served as meeting halls for civic leaders to make decisions, as classrooms where children could continue their lessons, and as vital social hubs where people could simply see one another's faces, share news. And remember, they were not alone. This careful planning reveals a profound insight. The builders knew that the greatest threat during a long confinement might not be starvation, but despair. They understood that to survive physically, they first had to survive psychologically, by preserving the very fabric of their society underground. This insight finds its clearest expression in the small, quiet rooms marked with a simple, enduring symbol, the cross. Several Christian chapels were carved directly into the rock, complete with altars and aisles. In a place devoid of sunlight, these spaces provided a different kind of light. Faith was not an afterthought it was infrastructure. In the face of an apocalyptic threat looming above, the need for spiritual sustenance was considered as critical as food or water. These chapels offered a place for prayer, for ritual, for seeking comfort and meaning during what must have felt like an endless night. They provided a moral and emotional anchor, reinforcing shared values and a sense of divine protection that would have been essential for maintaining hope and cohesion over months or years. The city was therefore a complete ecosystem, designed to sustain the body with its ingenious engineering and the soul with its communal and sacred spaces. It was a blueprint for enduring not just an attack, but the profound loneliness and fear that would follow it. This holistic vision forces us to ask, what kind of people were they? What identity, what shared story, compelled them to carve their entire world anew into the stone? The stone does not speak of its first architects. Dating is like trying to read a book where every generation has written over the previous chapter, blurring the lines between author and editor. There is no grand cornerstone, no royal seal stamped into the rock to announce its birthday. Instead, its timeline is a whisper, pieced together from the subtle language of architecture itself. The shape of a chisel mark, the curve of a storage niche, a single piece of pottery left in the dust. The prevailing theory suggests the deepest, oldest chambers may have been started by the Phrygians, a powerful Iron Age kingdom, as early as the 8th or 7th centuries before the Common Era. These early spaces were likely simple, little more than fortified cellars or storage pits dug into the soft tuff. They were a seed, a foundational idea of refuge planted deep in the earth. But the sprawling, 18-level metropolis we associate with almost certainly owes its scale to a later wave of builders, early Christians, between the 5th and 10th centuries of the Common Era. This was a period of immense upheaval in the region, a relentless cycle of conflict that made the underground not just a shelter, but a necessity for preserving a way of life. Some researchers even peer further back, suggesting the Hittites, a Bronze Age empire, might have first recognized the strategic value of this landscape 1,000 years before the Phrygians. This layering of possibility makes a true archaeological palimpsest. That term refers to an ancient parchment where old writing was scraped away so the page could be reused, yet faint traces of the original text remain visible beneath. Is a physical palimpsest of fear. Each generation, facing its own unique apocalypse, expanded the blueprint they inherited. They deepened the wells, added new levels of living quarters, carved new chapels, and reinforced the defenses. They did not build a city in one lifetime. They inherited a concept and passed it on, enlarged and improved to their children. This is why the question of who built it has no single answer. It was built by the Phrygians who feared invading armies, by the early Christians who sought sanctuary from persecution, and by every anonymous family in between who added a room, deepening their investment in a future below. The city is not a monument to a single moment of terror, but to the enduring human condition of seeking safety. Its ambiguous origins only deepen its power, transforming it from a historical artifact into a timeless symbol. It stands as proof that the impulse to dig in, to hide, and to endure is written into our story across the centuries. The Hittite theory adds a chilling new layer of time to story. Imagine a forgotten empire, not from the classical or early Christian world, but from the deep shadows of the Bronze Age. The Hittites were not a minor kingdom. At their height, around 3,500 years ago, they ruled a vast empire centered in Anatolia, rivaling even ancient Egypt. They were formidable innovators, credited with some of the earliest uses of iron, masters of diplomacy recorded on clay tablets, and builders of immense, fortified capital cities atop great stone foundations. They understood security on a grand scale. Their sudden and catastrophic disappearance from history is one of archaeology's great enduring mysteries, part of a wider unraveling known as the Late Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 years before the Common Era, a perfect storm of crises seems to have swept across the Mediterranean and Near East. Mycenaean palaces fell, Egyptian pharaohs fought mysterious sea peoples, trade networks shattered, and great cities burned. The causes are still debated, a mix of climate shifts causing drought and famine, mass migrations of displaced peoples, internal rebellions, and the breakdown of international systems. For the Hittites, it was the end. Their central power dissolved, their cities were abandoned, and their knowledge faded into legend. This is where the hypothesis takes root. If the Hittites, with their expertise in massive construction and their intimate knowledge of the Anatolian landscape, saw the storm coming, what would they have done? They might have looked at the soft tuff of Cappadocia and seen the ultimate fallback position, a refuge not just from an army, but from a collapsing world. The initial, deepest tunnels could be their work, a desperate, secret project initiated by a civilization preparing for its own eclipse. This idea transforms from a large underground city into something far more profound, a long project of continuity. The Hittites, facing an apocalypse, may have carved the first sanctuary. Centuries later, the Phrygians would have found these ancient tunnels and expanded them. Later still, early Christians would have inherited this deep-laid blueprint and built it into the full city we recognize. Each wave of inhabitants, facing their own era's existential threat, was essentially adding new chapters to a survival manual first drafted in the Bronze Age. The city becomes a physical timeline of human anxiety, a shared architectural response to fear passed down through generations like a family heirloom. It suggests that the drive to seek shelter in the earth is not tied to one faith or one empire, but is a fundamental human reaction to existential danger. The stones, if this theory is correct, hold the whispered plans of an empire that knew it was dying and tried to build a seed for something to endure long after its name was forgotten. But even the most perfectly designed refuge can become a prison without a way to speak across the darkness. This brings us to another subtle stroke of genius hidden in the rock, the city's nervous system. Among the many shafts drilled for air and water, archaeologists noticed a distinct type. These channels were narrower, often just wide enough for a human voice to pass through, and they connected specific, distant levels of the city in a direct vertical line. They were not random imperfections. They were purpose-built communication tubes. In the absolute silence of the deep, a person standing at the opening of one of these shafts on, say, the 5th level, could speak in a normal tone and be heard clearly by someone listening at its opening on the 10th level far below. The sound would travel straight down the carved stone channel, a clean conduit for the human voice, bypassing the twisting, turning corridors that would muffle and distort it. Imagine the scene during a crisis. A watchman at a hidden surface entrance spots danger. Instead of a frantic, time-consuming dash down multiple staircases to sound an alarm, he simply steps to the nearest communication shaft and calls down a warning. That warning could then be relayed from shaft to shaft, passing the message through the heart of the mountain in moments, reaching the deepest storage rooms or the most distant residential quarters almost instantly. It was a prehistoric intercom, a technology of pure simplicity and profound effectiveness. This system reveals a sophisticated understanding of what truly holds a society together under extreme stress. The builders knew that survival depended on more than grain stores and fresh water. It depended on coordination, on shared knowledge, on the ability to act as one unified community even when scattered across 18 floors of stone. A delayed message about a breached door could mean the difference between a successful defense and a catastrophic collapse. The flow of information was as critical as the flow of air. These silent stone tubes ensured that the city remained a single, alert organism. A leader could issue orders, families could receive updates, and rumors could be countered with facts, all without anyone ever leaving their post. In the profound isolation of the underground, these shafts fought the creeping sense of disconnection and panic. They were the threads that stitched 20,000 individual fears into a collective, organized will. They turn from a mere shelter into something that feels eerily modern, a networked community where communication infrastructure was literally carved into the architecture. It prompts a haunting question about the society that built it. What were the messages most often sent through these stone telephones? Were they practical updates about supplies, or whispered words of reassurance in the long, dark wait? The very existence of these channels suggests they expected to need them, not just once, but repeatedly as part of the rhythm of a life lived in hiding. The most widely accepted chapter in story is one of faith seeking refuge in the dark. For early Christian communities across Cappadocia, the world above grew increasingly perilous under Roman rule, especially during periods of intense persecution. The Roman Empire, while often tolerant of diverse local gods, viewed the exclusive, non-state-aligned nature of Christianity as a direct threat to social and political order. Adherents could face severe consequences, from the loss of property and social standing to far more dire outcomes. In this atmosphere, the need for absolute secrecy was not a matter of preference, but of survival. The existing underground structures, perhaps first carved centuries earlier, presented a divine solution. Here was a sanctuary that could be entered and sealed away from prying eyes, a place where the community could gather, worship, and continue their way of life beyond the reach of imperial authority. Was not a vague shelter from some unknown future catastrophe, but a very specific, urgent answer to a present and terrifying reality. The threat was not a natural disaster or a distant army, but one's own neighbors and rulers, driven by an ideology that deemed their faith dangerous. This context transforms the city's chapels from interesting architectural features into the emotional and spiritual heart of the entire complex. Each simple cross carved into a wall was an act of quiet, defiant continuity. In these underground chambers, lit by flickering oil lamps, the rituals that defined them could proceed without fear. Hymns could be sung, scriptures could be read, and baptisms could be performed, preserving the community's identity during a time when practicing it openly could mean its end. Historical records from church fathers like Basil the Great, who lived in Cappadocia in the 4th century, explicitly mention Christians using rock-cut refuges in the region. This isn't speculative legend, it's documented history that gives names and context to the shadows in the rock. The city's design perfectly aligns with this need. The massive rolling stone doors were not just for holding back armies, but for sealing away the sound of prayer from Roman soldiers conducting searches above. The ventilation shafts ensured that the smoke from their lamps and cooking fires dissipated without a telltale plume. The deep wells meant they could wait out a prolonged hunt. Every ingenious feature served a dual purpose, sustaining physical life while protecting a spiritual one. This reframes Apocalypse. It was not a single, fiery event, but a slow, grinding pressure, a human-made end of days where the very act of belief could bring a world crashing down. The city stands as a monument to the lengths a community will go to preserve its soul, choosing a life in the eternal night over the loss of its light. Yet even as the Roman Empire faded, and Christianity became not just accepted but dominant, the digging did not stop. The stones had more to say, hinting at an even older, more primal reason for their existence. The conflict that defined this era was one of terrifying speed. Arab armies, masters of light cavalry, could strike deep into the Anatolian plateau without warning, their raids a blur of dust and steel aimed at plunder, captives, and sowing chaos. For the settled Byzantine communities of Cappadocia, there was no time to raise an army or build a traditional fortress wall. Their only viable defense was to become invisible. When scouts on the high ridges saw the distant clouds signaling an approaching raid, the entire population had a practiced, desperate routine. They would gather their most vital possessions, herd their livestock, and funnel into the hidden entrances of. Behind them, the massive stone doors would roll shut, blending seamlessly back into the hillside. To the raiders cresting the ridge, the valley below would appear eerily abandoned, a silent village of empty homes, its people and their wealth vanished without a trace. The invaders might burn the surface dwellings in frustration, but they could not waste precious campaign time trying to dig out a people they could not find. After a few days, the cavalry would move on, seeking easier targets. Then and only then, the stone doors would roll open again, and life would cautiously return to the sun. This cyclical rhythm of disappearance and return became a way of life for generations. The city's design was perfectly tailored to this grim dance. The upper-level stables could quickly accommodate the precious livestock driven inside. The vast, sealed storage rooms protected the season's harvest from being looted or burned. The communication shafts allowed sentries deep within to relay the all-clear signal without exposing anyone prematurely. Was not a one-time panic room. It was a recurring sanctuary, a seasonal retreat used perhaps dozens of times across 3 centuries of intermittent warfare. This phase of its history reveals a different kind of apocalypse. It was not a single, world-ending event, but a recurring historical pattern, a periodic, predictable wave of violence that communities learned to anticipate and endure. The city became part of their cultural memory, a physical heirloom of survival knowledge passed from parent to child. You were not just taught how to farm or weave. You were taught the signs of a raid, the quickest path to the hidden door, and how to live in the echoing dark for a week. This transforms our understanding of the city's purpose. It was not built for a permanent exile from the surface world, but for a temporary, tactical vanishing act. Its value lay in its ability to make an entire community disappear, and then reappear intact after the storm had passed. It served as a guarantee of continuity, ensuring that after every wave of conflict, the community, its culture, and its people would still be there to rebuild. This adaptability is perhaps most profound lesson. The same underground halls that once sheltered early Christians from persecution later shielded Byzantine families from cavalry raids. The stones did not care about the specific name of the threat above. They simply offered the same profound gift, a pause button for civilization, a place to wait out the chaos. But this raises a haunting logistical question about those long weeks of waiting. With 20,000 people and their animals sealed inside, how did they manage the most basic, unavoidable reality of life? What did they do with the waste? The city's corridors tell a story of controlled fear. They are not grand avenues for procession, but tight, constricted passages where the very architecture becomes a weapon. In many sections, the ceilings are deliberately low, and the walls press close, forcing anyone moving through them to crouch and proceed in a vulnerable, single-file line. This was not an accident of hasty digging. It was a calculated design choice, a form of architectural jujitsu that used an invader's own momentum and bulk against them. Imagine a group of armed soldiers, clad in armor, pushing their way into the dark. Instead of an open hall where they could form ranks, they find themselves squeezed into a narrow stone tube, unable to raise a weapon properly, unable to see past the person in front, and utterly exposed. For a defender waiting just around a bend, armed with nothing more than a spear or even heavy stones, it would be like shooting fish in a barrel. The corridor itself did the work of isolating and neutralizing the threat. This principle extends to the very steps underfoot. Many staircases connecting the levels do not have uniform, predictable steps. Some are shallow, others unexpectedly deep, or carved at slightly irregular angles. To a resident who used them daily, this uneven rhythm became second nature. But to an attacker rushing headlong into the unknown dark, it was a treacherous obstacle course. Each misstep, each stumble would break their momentum, create noise, and sow confusion in the ranks behind them. It turned a simple descent into a gauntlet of minor disasters. This attention to the psychology of movement reveals a mindset that expected the worst. The builders were not just creating a place to hide. They were designing a place to fight, on terms so favorable that the defenders held every possible advantage. The layout ensured that any combat would happen in choke points of their own choosing, where numbers and brute strength meant little, and intimate knowledge of the terrain meant everything. It was urban warfare, perfected centuries before the term existed, and moved entirely underground. This transforms from a passive refuge into an active fortress, a machine built to dismantle an invading force piece by piece in the dark. The true challenge was not surviving the first day, but the 100th. Safety in the stone came at a profound cost, a complete renegotiation of what it meant to live. Every morning, if you could call it that, began in an eternal, silent night. The only timekeeper was the communal rhythm of the city itself, a schedule dictated by hunger, prayer, and the need to preserve precious lamp oil. Light was a luxury, measured in drops. Simple clay lamps, fueled by olive oil, would have been lit only for essential tasks, casting a fragile, dancing glow that made the carved walls seem to breathe. Shadows were a permanent resident, pooling in corners and stretching down endless corridors, turning familiar faces into half-seen specters. In this world, the loss of a lamp was not an inconvenience. It was a minor catastrophe, plunging a family into a blindness so complete they could not see their own hands. The air held the story of their confinement. It would have carried a complex, layered scent. The earthy dampness of the rock mixed with the pungent smell of animals from the upper-level stables, the aroma of baking bread and stew from the communal kitchens, and the sharp, smoky tang of burning lamp oil. It was the smell of a world turned inward, a bottled atmosphere shared by thousands. Sound behaved strangely, too. The low ceilings and winding tunnels would have muffled distant noises, creating pockets of eerie quiet, while nearby conversations, the clatter of a pot, or a child's cry would echo with unsettling clarity. Reminding everyone of their proximity, privacy was a concept carved in inches. Families lived in small, cell-like rooms, often just a single chamber with sleeping platforms cut into the walls and niches for their few belongings. There was no window to open for fresh air, only the constant, gentle sigh from the ventilation shafts. Every cough, every whispered argument, every moment of grief or joy was shared with the stone, absorbed by the porous rock and by neighbors living just a few feet away through a wall. This lack of sonic privacy meant that emotions, like air, became communal property. A wave of anxiety or a spark of laughter could travel through the city as clearly as a message down a communication shaft. The architecture forced a radical intimacy, making the mental state of the community as important as its grain supply. To prevent despair from seeping through the walls like dampness, structure was everything. The day would have been segmented by ritual. Gatherings in the chapels for prayer provided spiritual anchor points. Lessons for children in the larger halls served the dual purpose of education and keeping young minds occupied, away from the terrifying stillness. Work assignments, whether grinding grain, repairing tools, or monitoring the air shafts, gave everyone a purpose, a reason to move and contribute. Social life would have condensed in the communal kitchens and gathering halls, where sharing a meal was less about nutrition and more about reaffirming human connection. About seeing a friend's face fully illuminated for a moment, a tiny defiance against the dark. They were not just waiting out a threat, they were performing the act of civilization, daily, deliberately, to remind themselves who they were. The greatest enemy was not the force outside the stone door, but the slow, silent pressure of the mountain itself, a weight that could crush the spirit long before it touched the body. Their survival depended on outlasting not just a siege, but the profound, soul-deep longing for the sun. The most basic arithmetic of survival is brutally simple. 20,000 people require thousands of tons of food. A well-defended door means nothing if the pantry behind it is empty. Within, the evidence of this calculation is carved into the rock itself, in the form of vast, silent chambers that served as the city's strategic reserve. These were not simple root cellars. They were massive, climate-controlled granaries, deep enough and cool enough to preserve wheat, barley, and dried legumes for years, if not decades. The soft, tough rock provided natural insulation, maintaining a stable, cool temperature that slowed spoilage and kept pests at bay. Alongside these stores, evidence points to the preservation of salted meats and pickled vegetables, creating a larder designed for the long, monotonous haul. This was not about storing a season's harvest. It was about stockpiling time itself, banking enough sustenance to outlast a crisis whose end no one could predict. But the planners understood that survival is more than just calories. It is about nutrition, morale, and the fragile threads of normalcy. This is where the discovery of the city's industrial heart becomes so telling. Archaeologists found large, circular presses carved directly into the floor of certain chambers, their basins worn smooth by constant use. These were not for decoration. They were full-scale wine and olive oil presses. Think about what this means. They were not just storing water and grain. They were producing the cultural staples of their diet and their society underground. Olive oil provided essential fats for cooking and for the lamps that held back the dark. Wine was more than a beverage. In a world without modern medicine, it was a safer source of hydration than potentially contaminated water, a mild antiseptic, and a crucial comfort, a tiny taste of the sun-drenched vineyards far above. The presence of these presses reveals a stunning level of forethought. They brought not just sacks of grain into the depths, but the very means of production, olives, grapes, and the knowledge to process them. This transformed the city from a stocked pantry into a functioning agricultural extension of the surface world. Even the animals had their place in this vertical ecosystem. On the upper levels, close to the hidden entrances for quick access, lay extensive stables. Stone tethering rings are still anchored in the walls, and carved troughs held water for goats, sheep, and perhaps a few precious cattle. Keeping livestock inside was a pragmatic, if pungent, necessity. These animals were a renewable source of vital protein through milk and cheese, and in the most dire circumstances, meat. Their manure could have been used to fertilize any small, desperate gardens they might have attempted to cultivate with light channeled from the shafts, or simply dried and burned as fuel. Every element of the surface world's economy was considered, adapted, and integrated into the subterranean plan. This comprehensive approach to food security speaks to a sophisticated understanding of siege economics and public health. The planners knew that a population living on a scant, monotonous ration would weaken quickly, becoming vulnerable to illness that could spread like wildfire in the close, shared air. A balanced diet with grains, proteins, and fats from oil and dairy was a medical strategy as much as a culinary one. It was about preserving strength, both physical and mental. The ability to bake bread, to press oil, to have a shared cup of wine, these were acts of cultural defiance. They were daily reminders that this was not merely an existence, but a life they intended to continue, with all its familiar rhythms, even in the absolute dark. The city's true depth is measured not in feet, but in the foresight of its pantry. It was built for an unknown tomorrow, stocked with the careful hope that when those stone doors finally rolled open again, a community would walk out, not just alive, but still fundamentally itself. The silence within holds another, quieter mystery. When archaeologists first entered its chambers, they encountered a profound emptiness. Unlike the rich, cluttered tombs of pharaohs or the ash-preserved rooms of Pompeii, these carved halls yielded surprisingly few personal artifacts. There were no heaps of abandoned pottery, no scattered tools, no forgotten jewelry or children's toys littering the floors. The city was found clean, swept, and largely bare. This scarcity of objects is not an absence of evidence, but a powerful form of evidence in itself. It tells a story of deliberate departure, not panicked flight. Imagine the scene, not of an ending, but of a transition. The threat, whether a raiding party or a period of persecution, has finally passed. Word travels down the communication shafts that the surface is safe once more. What follows is not a rush, but a careful, organized exodus. Families return to their small rock-cut rooms and gather every essential item: their cooking pots, their blankets, their precious lamps and oil, their few religious icons. They lead their animals back up the steep staircases and out into the blinding sunlight. They leave the city as they found it, functional, orderly, and waiting. This meticulous retrieval reveals a crucial truth about its purpose. It was not a final refuge, a place where people went to meet their end. It was a strategic asset, a piece of community infrastructure as vital as a granary or a well, but one used only in emergencies. The inhabitants viewed it as a temporary haven, a tool to be used and then carefully reset for the next time. This pattern of cyclical use transforms our understanding of the city's rhythm. Its history is not a single dramatic narrative that concludes with a sealed door. Instead, it is a series of pulses, long periods of quiet emptiness punctuated by intense, crowded life, followed again by emptiness. The very cleanliness of the place suggests it was maintained across generations. Its ventilation shafts kept clear, its rolling stone doors oiled and tested. Its storage rooms ready to be filled anew with the next harvest. This emptiness speaks louder than any treasure hoard ever could. It tells of a community that mastered the art of disappearance, not as a final act, but as a recurring skill. They learned to fold their entire world into the mountain, and then, when the coast was clear, to unfold it back into the light, leaving no trace behind. The city's greatest artifact is its own preparedness, a hollowed-out space that held not things, but the repeated promise of survival, but was not an isolated fortress. Its true significance emerges when you realize it was just one node in a sprawling, hidden web. Scattered across Cappadocia are the remains of hundreds of other underground settlements, some small, some vast, all carved with the same desperate ingenuity. The most famous of these is another multi-level city just a few miles away. And between them, and likely connecting to other sites now lost, archaeologists have discovered the faint traces of long, subterranean tunnels. These were not just escape routes for a single community. They were underground highways, a secret network that could allow entire populations to shift between refuges, to share resources, or to coordinate a defense across a wide region. Think of it not as a single bunker, but as a distributed system. If one city's entrance was discovered or compromised, its inhabitants could theoretically retreat through these dark corridors to another, safer complex, sealing passages behind them as they went. This transforms our understanding completely. The preparation was not local, it was regional. The scale of planning required to carve not just individual cities, but a connected infrastructure between them, points to a society-wide, coordinated effort that must have spanned generations. It implies shared knowledge, agreed-upon engineering standards, and a collective agreement on the nature of the threat. The entire landscape, from the fairy chimneys on the surface to the labyrinth beneath, was being systematically engineered for one purpose: collective survival. This network creates the staggering image of a parallel, subterranean civilization, existing just beneath the feet of whatever life continued above. It was a shadow world, a complete mirrored society ready to activate in times of crisis. The story of Cappadocia is no longer just about a people who dug deep to hide. It is about a culture that reorganized its very existence around the possibility of vanishing, building a second, secret homeland in the bedrock, where the measure of safety was not the height of your walls, but the depth of your connections. The very design of whispers the nature of the fear that built it. A rolling stone door can stop a soldier, but a city sealed against the outside air suggests a terror that breathes. To understand the apocalyptic threat, we must look beyond any single enemy and into the collective memory of a civilization. For the people of Cappadocia, the end of the world was not a singular event, but a recurring pattern, a shadow that fell across their land in different forms across centuries. The most direct and documented threats were undeniably human. Early Christian communities faced periods of intense scrutiny and persecution under Roman authority, where their faith itself was a capital risk. Later, during the Byzantine era, the swift and brutal raids by Arab cavalry made the surface world a place of unpredictable violence. These were clear and present dangers, the kind that sends a community running for a hidden door. The city's defensive corridors and sealed entrances are a perfect response to this. Yet the scale and completeness of its design hint at something more. Why build a habitat capable of sustaining 20,000 people for years, with its own independent water and air supply, if the threat was a raid that would pass in a week? This level of preparation suggests a fear that the world above could become uninhabitable for a very, very long time. This is where history meets a deeper, more ancient kind of dread. Geological and climatic records tell a story of a volatile past. Ice cores from Greenland and tree rings from ancient forests reveal periods of extreme and sudden climate cooling in the years around 536 and 540 of the Common Era. Events now linked by some researchers to massive volcanic eruptions. These events would have thrown immense amounts of ash and sulfur into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight across the globe. The result would have been a volcanic winter, a cascade of failure. Crops would die under cold, gray skies, leading to widespread hunger. The climate shock would disrupt societies, trigger migrations, and intensify every existing conflict. For those living through it, it would have felt like the sun itself was dying, a slow, suffocating apocalypse with no enemy to fight. Could the memory of such a cataclysm, passed down through generations, have inspired the depth of preparation? The city's ventilation system, designed to filter and renew air from a sealed world, takes on a new, chilling meaning in this light. It is a technology built against the fear of a poisoned sky. Then there are the even more speculative, yet persistent theories. Some researchers point to evidence of cometary fragments or airbursts in the same general, catastrophic events from the heavens that could have leveled forests and ignited fires across regions. The collective trauma of witnessing such a celestial disaster would be woven into myth and survival strategy for centuries. The truth likely lies in a terrifying composite. Imagine a society that had endured all of it, one after another. They had survived the political apocalypse of persecution, the military apocalypse of relentless raids, and the oral history of a climatic apocalypse that starved their ancestors. Their greatest fear would not have a single name. It would be the collapse itself, the moment when every system, political, agricultural, social, fails at once. Then is not a response to a specific army or a single volcano. It is the ultimate hedge against uncertainty. It is architecture built for the day when the surface offers nothing, when the very air might be unbreathable, and the only way to preserve a future is to bury it, fully formed, in the stone. The city is a monument to a people who decided that if the world was going to end, they would simply move to a safer one, directly beneath their feet. The rock holds a memory of a dying sun. While human conflict offers a clear reason to hide, the sheer scale of self-sufficiency points to a threat of a different magnitude, one that could not be outrun or negotiated with. Geological and climatic data from ice cores and ancient tree rings tell a story of profound instability in the eastern Mediterranean's past. The region experienced severe, prolonged droughts and sudden cooling events that could last for years, events that would wither crops, kill livestock, and starve empires. One of the most dramatic potential triggers was a massive volcanic eruption, like the catastrophic explosion of Thera in the 17th century before the Common Era. An event of that scale would have thrown millions of tons of ash and sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere, creating a veil that scattered sunlight back into space. The result would be a volcanic winter, a period of global cooling where summers never warmed, harvests failed repeatedly, and the blue sky turned a perpetual grim gray. In such a world, the surface becomes a hostile environment. The cold is relentless, food becomes impossibly scarce, and the social order crumbles under the weight of collective desperation. This theory reframes not as a fortress against armies, but as a climate change bunker. Its design is a perfect response to an environmental apocalypse. The thick rock walls provide natural insulation against a world grown suddenly, dangerously cold. The vast, deep storage rooms are not for a seasonal surplus, but for a multi-year reserve, a hedge against consecutive agricultural failures. The sealed ventilation shafts take on a new, critical purpose. They filter the very air, protecting those inside from the fine, abrasive volcanic ash that could poison lungs and choke the sky for years after an eruption. The independent water supply from the deep aquifers becomes the ultimate asset, a source untouched by surface contamination or drought. In this light, every feature of the city aligns with surviving a catastrophe that rendered the outside world uninhabitable for a generation. It was a lifeboat carved into the continent, built to preserve the seed of a community through a long, ecological night. This perspective adds a haunting layer to the story. The people of May have been preparing for an enemy with no face, a silent, atmospheric shift that could end their world just as surely as any sword. Their greatest innovation was not in hiding from others, but in insulating themselves from the very climate of their planet. Perhaps the most profound truth about is that it is not unique in the human imagination. Across continents and cultures, from the frozen north to the desert southwest, our oldest stories whisper the same survival strategy. After the cataclysmic battle of, Norse legends tell of a man and a woman who survived by hiding deep within the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil, emerging to repopulate a green and renewed earth. In the Hopi tradition, ancestors live through successive worlds, often taking refuge in a subterranean realm called the before emerging into the current one. Similar themes echo in myths from the Andes to Australia, a recurring dream of salvation found not by ascending to the sky, but by descending into the ground. This is not a coincidence. It is a deep-seated archetype, a fundamental story our species tells itself about endurance, provides something extraordinary, a physical, tangible counterpart to these global legends. We are no longer looking at just a myth or just an archaeological site. We are looking at the point where story and stone converge. This connection begs a compelling question. Could these widespread legends be distant cultural memories, passed down over thousands of years, of real events and real places like? Imagine a community that successfully used such a refuge to survive a regional disaster, a volcanic winter, or a wave of conflict. Their story of hiding in the earth, of waiting out the end of their world in a stone womb, would become the foundational epic for their descendants. Over generations, as the specific details of location and engineering faded, the core narrative would remain, transforming into myth. The great flood stories found in countless cultures may speak of rising waters, but these underground refuge myths speak of a different kind of deluge, a flood of fire or ice, or violence from which the only escape was down. Exploring these parallels suggests something fundamental about the human psyche when faced with existential threat. Our first instinct for salvation is often not a flight to the heavens, but a retreat into the embrace of the earth. The ground is our original shelter. It is stable, it is protective, and it offers a profound symbolic return to a place of safety and origins. Makes this instinct manifest in breathtaking scale. It is the myth made real, the archetype carved into bedrock, proving that when faced with the unthinkable, humanity's most consistent answer has been to dig in, to preserve, and to wait for the dawn. This transforms the city from a local wonder into a universal symbol. It becomes a key for understanding a shared thread in our collective story, a testament written in tunnels that echoes in tales told around the world. The stone door seals with a final, hollow thud, and the world shrinks to the radius of a lamp's flicker. This was the true tests architects faced, a challenge far subtler than air or water. How do you design a fortress for the human mind? Surviving underground for months, or even years, demanded a form of endurance that had nothing to do with physical strength. It required an architecture of sanity, a deliberate, carved-out defense against the creeping shadows of despair and madness that thrive in silence and endless night. The city's layout reveals a profound understanding of this invisible battle. The chapels were not an afterthought, they were psychological infrastructure. In a world without sunrise, the rituals of faith provided a different kind of calendar, marking the passage of time with prayer and song. Offering a narrative of hope and divine protection when the world above seemed abandoned. These spaces gave people a reason to look beyond their immediate fear, to connect with something enduring. Similarly, the large communal halls served a purpose deeper than mere gathering. They were theaters of solidarity. Here, in the shared light, people could see each other's faces, read expressions, and remember they were not alone in their dread. Shared meals in these spaces transformed a basic need into a reaffirmation of community, a daily ceremony that fought the isolating pull of the dark. The very corridors and room placements worked to combat a primal terror, the feeling of being trapped. The network of communication shafts meant you were never truly cut off. The knowledge that you could hear a voice from another level, or that a warning could reach you, created a sense of connected agency. The multiple escape routes and the strategic depth offered a psychological exit, a mental map of options that countered helplessness. But architecture could only do so much. The daily maintenance of mental health would have fallen to ritual and routine. Storytelling would have been a vital lifeline, a way to preserve history, teach lessons, and transport young minds away from the stone walls. The repetition of daily tasks, grinding grain, tending to the air shafts, even cleaning the living quarters, provided a crucial anchor to normalcy. These routines imposed order on chaos, giving each day a shape and each person a purpose. This intense, shared experience would have forged a group identity of incredible strength, a bond born from collective survival. Yet this same pressure cooker environment carried severe risks. The constant proximity, the lack of privacy, the unrelenting ambient stress could just as easily breed simmering conflict, paranoia, or deep depressive episodes. A single person's unraveling could ripple through the entire community. Its greatest innovation, therefore, might have been sociological. Its design managed human nature as meticulously as it managed airflow. By providing spaces for privacy, for worship, and for community, it offered outlets for the full spectrum of human emotion. It created a scaffold for society to hold itself together, understanding that the most dangerous breach would not come from a cracked door, but from a broken spirit. The city was built not just to preserve lives, but to preserve minds, ensuring that if the day ever came to roll the stone door open again, a sane and whole community would walk back into the light. The deepest secrets are still buried. For all we have uncovered, the published maps and accessible corridors represent perhaps only 10% of the entire complex. 18 levels have been identified, but the lowest chambers remain a mystery, their entrances choked with centuries of collapsed rock or deliberately sealed by the hands of the last people to leave them. Beyond these barriers lies the true, unknown scale of the city, a final frontier of shadow and stone. This is not simply an unexplored space, it is a deliberate silence, a part of the story the city has chosen not to tell us yet. What could be down there that warranted such a permanent closure? The possibilities ignite the imagination. Some archaeologists theorize the existence of truly colossal chambers, spaces large enough to serve as grand assembly halls or even underground fields for limited cultivation, using light channeled from massive hidden shafts. Others speculate about specialized repositories, perhaps even a library of scrolls or tablets, a time capsule of the knowledge this civilization deemed essential to preserve through an apocalypse. The most practical, yet profound theory involves water. The lowest levels may descend all the way to the water table, not just tapping it with wells, but actually interfacing with it. Imagine vast, naturally flooded caverns, acting as immense, pristine reservoirs or even harboring docks for small boats, suggesting the city was prepared for a threat that involved rising water or the need to travel secretly beneath the earth. Each sealed corridor is a question mark. Did the inhabitants, in their final retreat, close off their most sacred or vital spaces to protect them from a threat they never returned to face? Or was the debris simply the result of a final structural collapse, a natural tomb sealing itself? The potential locked in those depths is staggering. A single, preserved chamber with intact artifacts, wall carvings, or records could rewrite our entire understanding of the city's chronology, its builder's identity, and the precise nature of the calamity they feared. It could reveal the full extent of their technical knowledge or the depth of their spiritual practices. These zones represent the ultimate limit of our discovery, a humbling reminder that for all our technology and curiosity, the mountain still holds the final chapter. The story of, as we know it, is incomplete. Its full purpose and capacity remain its most closely guarded secret, waiting in the dark for a future generation to finally roll the stone door aside. The same impulse that carved those ancient corridors still shapes concrete and steel today. Our modern world is dotted with its own versions of silent testaments to a fear that never truly left us. During the Cold War, governments constructed vast fallout shelters, while families built backyard bunkers stocked with canned goods, preparing for a blinding flash they hoped would never come. Today, that drive has evolved into a high-tech industry, with luxury survival compounds and deep earth bunkers marketed to those who can afford a ticket out of any future calamity, be it a pandemic, a climate-driven collapse, or social unrest. These structures, separated by, are branches of the same family tree, is not a relic, it is a prototype. It is the ancient, full-scale model for a very modern question. What do we do when we believe the world above is ending? The connection is more than architectural, it is psychological. The people of Cappadocia looked at their unstable world and invested generations of labor into a stone insurance policy. We look at our own uncertain century and do the same, with reinforced concrete and hydroponic gardens. The tools have changed, but the foundational instinct to retreat into the earth's embrace when the sky feels threatening remains utterly unchanged. This parallel offers a powerful lens. By studying why they dug, we inadvertently study why we still dig. Their apocalypse had many names: persecution, invasion, a poisoned sky. Ours have different labels, but the core dread of systemic failure is a shared language across time. Holds up a mirror, and in its polished stone, we see reflected our own anxieties about global threats that feel both immense and impersonal. Yet this mirror also reveals a stark and uncomfortable question they had to answer, and we must confront: who gets to come inside? The ancient city was a communal project, designed for an entire society of 20,000. Its scale suggests a collective answer to survival. Our contemporary bunker culture often trends toward a private, exclusive solution, a secure retreat for the individual or the privileged few. This shift prompts a profound ethical dilemma about the kind of future we are planning to preserve. Are we safeguarding a community, a culture, a cross-section of humanity with all its knowledge and skills? Or are we merely building a vault for a solitary existence, a life stripped down to mere continuity? The choices made in the bedrock of Cappadocia speak to a belief in preserving a social fabric. Their chapels, meeting halls, and shared stores were investments in a future where we survived. Our modern preparations force us to define what and who that we is. The Silent City challenges us to consider not just how to survive, but what is worth surviving for. It connects an 8th century, before the Common Era fear, directly to our 21st century preoccupations, asking if our advanced technology has outpaced our ancient understanding that survival, in any meaningful sense, is always a collective act. The massive stone doors once sealed against invaders, but today they stand open to a different kind of crowd. Now faces a modern dilemma. The very act of sharing its wonder threatens its survival. As a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a major tourist destination, thousands of visitors now walk its ancient corridors every year, their footsteps echoing where once only whispers traveled. This attention provides essential funding for maintenance and research, a vital lifeline that keeps the city accessible. Yet each breath of warm, humid air from the surface, each touch of a hand on a carved wall, and the cumulative weight of countless footsteps introduce a new, slow-moving crisis. The soft, tough rock that made the city possible is also its greatest vulnerability. Constant changes in humidity from the outside air can cause the stone to expand and contract minutely over time, leading to an erosion. The very stairs worn smooth by generations of residents are now being worn down further, millimeter by millimeter, by the soft tread of modern shoes. Preservation is no longer a battle against a sudden apocalypse, but a careful, continuous campaign against the gentle abrasion of curiosity. Teams of conservators now work to manage this balance, implementing systems to monitor air quality and temperature in real time. They limit daily visitor numbers, creating a controlled flow that reduces stress on the environment. Structural engineers conduct regular laser scans of the chambers, mapping the slightest shifts in the walls to predict and prevent potential instability. The goal is not to lock the city away, but to calibrate its exposure, to allow the public to witness this marvel while ensuring it remains intact for future generations. This presents a profound irony. The city that survived of threats from above is now most endangered by the peaceful footsteps of those who come to admire it. The silent, patient pressure of tourism is the new siege, and its defense requires a different kind of ingenuity, one of sensors, schedules, and sustainable stewardship. Protecting today means understanding that its greatest enemy is no longer a force of destruction, but the very love and fascination it inspires. The silence of was never truly silent. Recent scientific investigations have peeled back another layer of its design, revealing a hidden architecture of sound. Using the tools of, researchers have mapped how noise traveled through the stone corridors and chambers, discovering that the city was engineered not just for sight and touch, but for hearing as well. This field studies the acoustic properties of ancient spaces, listening to what the echoes can tell us about how those spaces were lived in and used. The findings are striking. The small, simple chapels carved into the rock possess remarkable resonant qualities. When a single voice speaks or chants within them, the sound is amplified and enriched, the stone walls acting as a natural soundboard that gives depth and power to ritual. A prayer or hymn offered in such a space would have felt immersive and profound, transforming a personal act of faith into a shared, enveloping experience that resonated in the chests of all present. This was likely no accident. The builders may have selected or shaped these specific rooms for their acoustic properties, using the mountain itself to magnify the spiritual practices that held their community together. The effect would have been a powerful tool against the oppressive quiet, using sacred sound to define space and time in a world without sunrises. Beyond the chapels, the entire city functioned as a complex soundscape. Tests within the narrow communication shafts confirmed their efficiency, showing how a spoken word could travel cleanly for dozens of feet vertically with little distortion, a stark contrast to the muffled, confusing echoes of the main corridors. This created a clear hierarchy of sound, whispers of urgent news traveling directly through stone conduits, while the general hum of daily life, the distant clatter from a kitchen or the lowing of a goat in its stable, would have been softened and muted by the twisting passages. This acoustic design served multiple, intelligent purposes. It enabled crisp, reliable command and control during a crisis. It allowed the spiritual life of the community to be felt as much as heard, reinforcing unity and morale, and it may have provided a subtle defensive advantage. For an unfamiliar intruder, the sound environment would have been deeply disorienting, footsteps echoing from unseen directions, whispers seeming to come from the walls themselves, amplifying feelings of vulnerability and confusion in the absolute dark. For the residents, however, this was a known and navigable auditory map. The way sound behaved told them how far they were from a communal hall, whether a door was open or shut, or if people were gathering in a chapel. This sophisticated manipulation of the sensory environment reveals a holistic vision of habitation. The builders were not merely carving rooms, they were crafting an entire atmosphere. They considered how breath would move, how light would fall, and crucially, how sound would travel. Their goal was a multisensory refuge, a world below that could engage the human spirit on every level, using every tool available to make the stone feel less like a tomb and more like a home. The echoes we measure today are the fading imprint of that careful, thoughtful creation. The city's final chapter is not one of collapse, but of quiet obsolescence. For over 1,000 years, served as a recurring sanctuary, its stone doors rolling shut and open in rhythm with the crises of the world above. Its permanent abandonment likely began sometime after the 10th century, as a new, more enduring kind of stability settled over the Anatolian plateau. The Byzantine Empire, after centuries of struggle, had consolidated its control and fortified its borders. Later, under the rule of the Seljuk Turks, the region entered a new phase where centralized authority and different patterns of conflict made large-scale, surprise raids less frequent. The existential dread that had fueled the digging began to recede. The apocalyptic shadow that once seemed permanent slowly lifted, and with it, the urgent need for a world beneath the world faded. The city did not fall to a conqueror's army or a catastrophic breach. It was simply no longer necessary. Its abandonment was a gradual process, a slow forgetting. Families stopped maintaining the deep ventilation shafts. They ceased stocking the lowest granaries. The last communal meal was eaten in the echoing halls, the last prayer whispered in the rock-cut chapel, and the massive stone door was rolled shut one final time, not in panic, but in peaceful redundancy. Over the following centuries, wind-blown soil and rockfall gently choked the hidden entrances. The precise locations faded from common memory, becoming half-remembered legends told by elders, stories of a great hiding place from the old, fearful days. The city did not die, it merely went to sleep, its purpose fulfilled. This is a profound and hopeful truth about its silence is not a monument to failure, but to success. The community it was built to protect ultimately outlasted the need for it. The return of stability, the slow healing of the surface world, meant the deepest refuge could be left behind. The abandonment represents a collective exhale, a civilization finally stepping out of the defensive crouch it had held for generations. The happy ending was not emerging from the dark, but choosing never to go back in. Its empty corridors stand as evidence that the fears which seem eternal can, sometimes, be outlived. The city's greatest legacy may be that it was eventually forgotten, because the world above had finally become a place where remembering how to hide was no longer the most important skill a child needed to learn. The stories we tell about often reach for the stars, but the truth is anchored firmly in the earth. In popular retellings, the city's scale and mystery have sometimes sparked wild speculation, suggesting its builders must have been visitors from other worlds or members of a lost, hyper-advanced civilization. Other tales try to fit it into familiar religious narratives, proposing it was a refuge built for Noah's family during a global flood. These ideas are captivating, painting a picture of impossible ancient technology or divine purpose. Yet archaeology asks us to listen to a different, more human story whispered by the stone itself. The evidence points not to alien laser tools, but to countless simple chisels wielded by generations of determined hands. It speaks of a profound understanding of local geology, not lost superscience. The soft, tough rock was their greatest resource, a material so workable that patient effort could shape an empire from the inside out. The true narrative is one of coordinated human labor across centuries, a pragmatic response to the very real historical pressures of persecution, invasion, and environmental fear. This grounded reality is, in many ways, more impressive than any fantasy. It means that every corridor, every air shaft, and every rolling stone door is a testament to what ordinary people, united by a common dread and a shared will to survive, can achieve. They did not need help from beyond our world to create a wonder. Their achievement lies in their relentless, collective effort, in their choice to invest the work of lifetimes into a sanctuary for their descendants. This human-scale story does not diminish grandeur, it amplifies it. The city stands as a monument to pragmatic fear and communal ingenuity, proving that our ancestors, when faced with the abyss, possessed all the genius necessary to carve a future from the dark. Their legacy is not a mystery to be solved by extraterrestrial clues, but a profound lesson in resilience written in tunnels we can still walk today. Deep beneath the surface, the city maintained its own eternal season. A constant, cool temperature of around 13 degrees Celsius, or 55 degrees Fahrenheit, held steady in the chambers. Regardless of whether a scorching summer sun or a bitter winter frost gripped the land above. This natural geothermal stability was not a happy accident. It was the foundational reason such long-term habitation was even conceivable. The Earth itself acted as a massive insulator, its immense thermal mass smoothing out the extreme swings of the surface world. Within the rock, the frantic cycle of seasons fell silent, replaced by a profound and steady chill. This consistency offered two immediate life-saving advantages. First, it created a giant, natural refrigerator. The vast storage rooms, carved into this perpetually cool bedrock, could preserve grains, dried legumes, and other vital foodstuffs for years, dramatically slowing the processes of decay and spoilage that would ravage them in the heat. Second, it provided a baseline of physical comfort and safety for the residents. They were protected from the lethal threat of freezing during an ice age event or a volcanic winter, and equally shielded from the exhausting, dehydrating heat of a Cappadocian summer. Especially critical when the body is under stress and resources are limited. But the builders did not simply rely on the rock's natural gift. They became master sculptors of the very air within it. They understood that stagnant, moist air in a cool environment would lead to condensation dripping from the ceilings, creating a damp, miserable atmosphere ripe for mold and illness. Their solution was the strategic placement and management of the ventilation shafts. By carefully controlling the flow of air between the surface and the deep chambers, they could manage humidity levels, preventing that dangerous condensation while still bringing in fresh oxygen. It was a delicate balancing act, using the shafts not just as lungs, but as a climate control system. They could, in essence, tune the city's atmosphere. This passive climate control represents one of history's earliest and most elegant examples of sustainable environmental engineering. There were no mechanical parts to break, no fuel to consume. The system leveraged the immutable properties of the deep earth and the basic physics of air pressure and temperature differentials. It was a partnership with the planet, a way of using the mountain's own nature to carve out a safe, stable microclimate within it. This feature was not a luxury. It was as crucial to the refuge as the rolling stone doors. A community can survive a siege if it has food, but it cannot survive in a space that is slowly poisoning them with damp or sapping their strength with oppressive, unmanaged temperatures. The constant cool breath of was the silent, unseen guardian that made all other preparations meaningful, turning a dark hole in the ground into a viable, long-term home. Story no longer belongs solely to the silent stone. It has ascended into our collective imagination, a powerful symbol recognized far beyond the borders of Cappadocia. You can find its echo in blockbuster films, in the pages of speculative fiction, and in the digital landscapes of video games, where it is often the archetype of the ultimate sanctuary. The last refuge in a broken world. It has become shorthand for the bunker mentality, a visual and conceptual touchstone for any story about a civilization hiding from its own end. This cultural resonance speaks to something deep within us. The city's legacy carries a dual, powerful message, a testament written in tunnels. On one hand, it is a soaring celebration of human adaptability. It showcases a breathtaking refusal to accept extinction, a community that met the prospect of oblivion not with surrender, but with an answer carved mile deep into the continent itself. It is the ultimate proof of our ingenuity under pressure, our ability to engineer survival in the most hostile of circumstances. Yet, intertwined with that admiration is a sobering reflection. The city is also a permanent monument to fear. It is the physical crystallization of a dread so profound, so consuming, that it justified redirecting the labor of generations into the dark. It reminds us that our ancestors were not so different from us. They looked at their horizon, saw gathering shadows, and made a calculated, monumental bet on the future. Their response to potential catastrophe was not paralysis, but proactive, stubborn creation. They did not merely hope to survive. They engineered the conditions for survival, chiseling the possibility of tomorrow from the unyielding rock of today. In this way, transcends its own history. It is no longer just an ancient city. It is an icon that holds up a mirror to humanity itself, reflecting both our brilliant, problem-solving light and the long shadows cast by our deepest anxieties. It asks us what we are so afraid of today and what we are building right now in response. The stone has shared its secrets slowly, but the next revelations will come from silent, invisible waves. The future of understanding lies not in more excavation, but in advanced technologies that allow us to see through the rock itself. Tools like ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR scanning can now map the contours of sealed chambers and collapsed tunnels without ever touching a chisel. Imagine sending pulses of energy into the earth and listening to the echo, building a three-dimensional blueprint of the entire complex, including the 90% we have never seen. This digital archaeology could reveal the true, staggering scale of the network, showing how deep the city really goes and pinpointing where hidden passages might connect to other sites across Cappadocia. We could walk through a perfect virtual model of the entire underground metropolis, exploring its full layout from the comfort of a laboratory. Beyond mapping the voids, science can now interrogate the dust. Tiny soil samples, carefully collected from different levels, hold a microscopic library of the past. Through advanced genetic analysis, researchers can detect traces of ancient DNA, not from bones, but from the biological residue of daily life. This could tell us what the inhabitants ate, what crops they stored, what animals they kept, and even what health challenges they faced, all from a few grains of sediment. Refined dating techniques, analyzing the rock surfaces or microscopic organic inclusions, might finally untangle the city's complex chronology, telling us precisely when each level was carved and in what order. Revealing the pulses of construction that responded to different historical fears. These non-invasive methods represent a fundamental shift. For centuries, archaeology meant digging, which is inherently destructive. Now we can ask the mountain to reveal its secrets without a single scar. This approach preserves the site for future generations while satisfying our endless curiosity. The promise is a hyper-detailed biography of the city, a narrative built from data points. We could learn not just how they built their refuge, but how they lived within it, what they consumed. And perhaps even trace the sequence of external calamities that drove them deeper by reading the layers of abandonment and renewal in the soil. This technological lens turns into a new kind of archive, one where every particle of dust is a page. And every hidden chamber is a chapter waiting to be read by the gentle touch of a laser or the sensitive analysis of a genome sequencer. The final secrets of the underground city may not be unlocked by a doorway, but by a wavelength. But who gets to tell the story of a place that belongs to everyone and no one? Is more than an archaeological site. It is a cultural crossroads where history, identity, and economics meet in the dim light of its tunnels. The narrative presented to the world is a powerful act of curation. Is this primarily a story of early Christian sanctuary, emphasizing the chapels and the era of persecution? Is it a tale of Hittite or Phrygian genius, focusing on the staggering engineering that predates common era timelines? Or is it a universal human story of resilience, a symbol that transcends any single faith or empire to speak to a shared instinct for survival? The answer is not found in the rock, but in the choices made by those who interpret it. Each lens offers a valid truth, yet each also subtly shapes the meaning for millions of visitors. When a guide emphasizes one historical phase over another, or when a museum display highlights certain artifacts, they are weaving a specific tapestry from the threads of the past. This matters because these stories shape how communities connect with their heritage and how the world understands a shared human legacy. The ethical responsibility is to present a narrative that is inclusive and multi-layered, acknowledging that the city's true history is a composite of all these fears and all these builders. It is not an either-or proposition. The Christian chapels exist within tunnels that may have been first carved 1,000 years earlier for a completely different civilization's apocalypse. The story is one of continuous adaptation, and honoring that complexity is the most honest tribute to the people who lived it. This extends to the practical stewardship of the site. The revenue from global tourism is essential for preservation, but a key question persists. How does that benefit flow to the local communities, who are the living inheritors of this landscape? Ensuring that the economic lifeblood of the site supports local guides, artisans, and businesses is crucial for sustainable stewardship. It turns the city from a distant monument into a vital part of the present-day community's well-being. Furthermore, the research itself must invite diverse scholarly perspectives, from geologists and engineers to historians of religion and climate scientists. A fuller understanding emerges only when many voices contribute to the interpretation. Legacy is thus being written twice, once in the ancient stone, and once in the careful, respectful choices we make today about how to share it, protect it, and integrate its meaning into the modern world. The final chapter of this underground city is not sealed in the past. It is being composed right now, in the balance we strike between access and preservation. Between a single story and the chorus of histories that echo in its depths, is a question carved in stone. What do you do when you believe tomorrow might not come? This sprawling underground refuge is far more than an archaeological wonder. It is a profound physical argument about the human condition. It represents the ultimate precautionary principle, a civilization's monumental investment in a single, haunting possibility, the what if. What if the armies come? What if the sky darkens? What if the world above becomes a place we can no longer call home? The city is the breathtakingly expensive answer to those silent questions, a testament to the staggering amount of energy, ingenuity, and communal labor a society will expend not on celebrating the present, but on hedging against a feared and uncertain future. In its echoing halls, we witness the two sides of our nature in stark relief. On one hand, there is our brilliant, collective cleverness. The ventilation shafts, the rolling stone doors, the deep wells, all of it showcases a species capable of profound technological and social adaptation, of solving incredibly complex problems of engineering and logistics. This is humanity as master builder, as ingenious survivor. Yet, fueling that immense project was a deep and abiding anxiety, a shared recognition of the world's terrifying fragility. The city is the crystallization of that collective fear, given form and function. It speaks to an understanding that the systems which sustain us, the peace, the harvest, the clear sky, are not permanent guarantees. They are temporary gifts, vulnerable to shattering change. This duality is the city's true legacy. It shows us that our drive for security and our capacity for innovation are often two sides of the same coin, minted in the furnace of shared dread. The need to belong, to be part of a community that will protect you and that you will help protect, is written into every communal kitchen and shared chapel. The technological cleverness is evident in every precisely angled air shaft. But beneath it all lies that foundational tremor, the anxiety that propels us to build walls, to store grain, to look at the horizon and wonder. In this way, does not belong only to the past. Its mirrored stone reflects our own modern preoccupations back at us. We may not carve cities from rock anymore, but we build digital fortresses, stockpile resources, and devise elaborate plans for scenarios we hope never unfold. The mediums have changed, but the melody remains the same, a song of ingenuity composed in the key of apprehension. The quest for continuity in a chaotic universe is perhaps one of the oldest stories we tell, and is one of its most enduring settings. It reminds us that to be human is, in part, to gaze into potential darkness and respond not just with fear, but with the stubborn, collective work of carving out a space for the light to endure. The descent begins with a single step into the cool, waiting dark. Modern lighting now guides the way, but your body immediately registers the change, the air growing still and dense with the scent of ancient stone and undisturbed earth. The staircase is not a gentle ramp. It is a steep, narrow channel carved straight down, each step worn smooth and slightly uneven by centuries of passing feet. You must turn sideways, pressing a hand against the cool wall for balance, descending into the mountain's throat. With every step, the world above, with its blue sky and open plains, feels like a distant memory, a story you were once told. The temperature settles into a constant, gentle chill that seeps through your clothes, a permanent season held within the rock. This is not a museum exhibit behind glass, it is an immersion. You are walking directly into the footprint of an ancient fear, into the very space where 20,000 people once held their breath. The scale is impossible to grasp until you are inside it, moving through a corridor so narrow your shoulders nearly brush both walls, then emerging into a sudden, vast chamber where the ceiling disappears into shadow high above. Your guide's voice echoes, pointing out a tethering ring for animals carved into the wall, the soot-blackened ceiling of a communal kitchen, the smooth groove in the floor where a massive stone door once rolled shut. But the facts are secondary to the feeling. It is a profound and unsettling quiet, broken only by the shuffle of visitors and the distant drip of water from a hidden seep. You find yourself running a hand over the wall, feeling the countless chisel marks, each one a tiny testament to a long-ago day of labor. In one of the small chapels, a simple cross is carved beside a niche that once held an oil lamp. Standing there, you can almost hear the faint echo of a chant, a whispered prayer for deliverance that once clung to this very air. The most common reaction is a powerful duality, a awe at the sheer human achievement coexisting with a low, visceral claustrophobia. You understand in your bones the ingenious design of the air shafts and storerooms, but you also feel the weight of the mountain above you, the reality of being sealed in. It prompts a silent, personal question. Could I have done this? Could I have left the sun behind for months, years, for the promise of safety in this eternal twilight? The tour follows a set path, but your mind wanders down the sealed corridors, into the blackness beyond the safety rails. You picture families huddled in these small rooms, children learning their lessons by lamplight in the hall, sentries listening at the communication shafts for any sound from the world they fled. The modern experience is a ghostly overlay, your comfortable shoes on the same stones where generations tread in desperation. You leave not just with photographs, but with a tangible, heavy sense of connection. The coolness of the rock stays with you, even as you climb back toward the dazzling Turkish sun. Emerging is its own kind of shock. The light feels too bright, the sky too vast. You have touched a different scale of time and human endurance, and the surface world seems suddenly fragile, a temporary condition. The visit does not simply teach you about history. It allows you to stand inside its heartbeat, to feel the immense, quiet weight of a community's will to endure. The deeper we understand, the more profound the shadows of its unknown become. For all the corridors we can walk and chambers we can map, the city guards its ultimate secrets with the same stubborn silence that once protected its people. Decades of meticulous archaeology have answered many hows, but the fundamental whys and the full scope of what was built remain tantalizingly out of reach. The most compelling mysteries are not gaps in knowledge, but invitations, drawing us further into the dark with questions that have no easy answers. What lies on the unexplored lowest levels, for instance, is a source of endless speculation. Current excavations stop at the 18th floor, but ground-penetrating radar suggests the complex may plunge far deeper. Are these sealed levels simply more storage rooms and living quarters, or do they hold something more significant? Some researchers theorize about a command center, a place where the city's elders could coordinate the entire population. Others wonder if the deepest chambers might interface directly with underground rivers or contain evidence of the very first, original excavations from past. Until those passages are carefully cleared and entered, we are left only with the echo of our own curiosity in the dark. Equally puzzling is the question of central planning. A project of this staggering scale, built across generations, implies a remarkable degree of coordination. Did a single, visionary architect draw up a master blueprint on parchment or clay, a grand design for a subterranean world? Or did the city grow more organically, like a living root system, with each generation adding onto and modifying the work of the last according to a shared, understood set of principles? The evidence in the stone suggests both. The uniformity of the ventilation shafts and the standardized rolling doors point to shared technical knowledge. Yet the slight variations in room sizes and the organic sprawl of some corridors hint at incremental, community-driven expansion. This lack of a definitive blueprint makes their achievement even more remarkable. It suggests a cultural consensus so strong that it acted as the blueprint, a collective understanding of survival that guided every chisel strike without needing a single, centralized architect. Then there is the trigger, the specific spark that ignited such a monumental undertaking. We can identify the historical pressures, the raids, the persecutions, the climatic fears. But what was the final straw? Was it a particularly brutal attack that wiped out a neighboring surface village? Was it a year of catastrophic crop failure that made the idea of a secure, climate-controlled larder irresistible? Or was it a slow, dawning realization over centuries that the surface world was simply too volatile, that true security meant going beyond simple cellars and creating an entire alternate reality below? The city itself is the answer, but it is an answer that speaks in generalities. The precise event, the moment a community leader stood up and said, "We start digging tomorrow for a city, not a cellar," is lost to time. This mystery forces us to sit with the slow burn of history, where monumental change is often born not from a single explosion, but from the accumulated weight of countless smaller fears. The logistics of its construction boggle the mind when considered practically. How was the labor organized in a pre-industrial society? This was not a project built by slaves under a whip, as the intimate, communal nature of the spaces suggests it was built by and for the people who would use it. Was it a seasonal effort, with farmers digging in the off months between planting and harvest? Did each family have a quota, responsible for carving their own living space and a portion of the communal infrastructure? The removal of the excavated rock alone represents a Herculean task. Millions of cubic feet of tuff had to be carved out, hauled to the surface through those narrow staircases, and disposed of without creating obvious telltale mounds that would give away the city's location. The coordination required for this, the scheduling, the tool maintenance, the feeding of the workers, points to a highly organized society with sophisticated social bonds and a clear hierarchy of labor. It was a pyramid project, but one built inverted, descending into the earth rather than rising toward the sun. Once sealed inside, how did they govern themselves? The silence of the stone offers no clear records of laws or leaders. In the absolute dark, with limited resources and the constant threat of internal conflict, maintaining order would have been as critical as maintaining the air supply. Was there a council of elders who made decisions in the communal halls? Did they have a guard force to monitor the entrances and manage the distribution of food and lamp oil? How did they resolve disputes when tensions inevitably flared in the cramped quarters? The very survival of the community depended on a system that balanced individual needs with the collective good, all while under the immense psychological pressure of confinement. The fact that they used the city repeatedly suggests they perfected this system. They developed a social technology, a way of being together in extreme adversity that was every bit as innovative as their stone doors and air shafts. This unseen social contract may be their most impressive and elusive invention. These enduring questions are not failures of archaeology. They are the lifeblood of the story. They are what transform from a static museum piece into a living puzzle. They remind us that the past is not a solved equation, but a conversation across time. Each unanswered question is an open door, inviting future researchers with new technologies and new perspectives to listen a little closer to the echoes in the rock. The city's greatest legacy may be this perpetual state of becoming known, a testament that some secrets are so deeply woven into the human story that they refuse to be fully unearthed. Ensuring the search for understanding never ends, final lesson is not written in any single stone, but in the collective shape of its existence. It is a monument carved not to a king or a god, but to a simple, powerful idea, the will to see a tomorrow. From the deep hum of its ventilation shafts to the silent weight of its rolling doors, every feature speaks of a community that refused to be a victim of its time. They looked at a horizon filled with uncertainty, with the very real shadows of conflict and a changing world, and they responded not with paralysis, but with creation. They channeled their collective fear into a project of breathtaking cooperation, transforming raw anxiety into the meticulous geometry of a sanctuary. This city, born from apocalyptic dread, ultimately became a testament to the opposite of despair. It is a story of resilience written in tunnels, a narrative that proves our deepest instincts are not just for survival, but for preserving meaning, connection, and identity. The chapels, the gathering halls, the shared stores, they all point to a profound understanding that to endure physically, you must first endure as a community. They were not just saving lives, they were safeguarding a way of life, ensuring that if the sun ever shone again, their songs, their stories, and their sense of self would walk back into the light with them. This legacy holds up a quiet mirror to our own era. We may not carve cities from rock, but we too face horizons of uncertainty. We build digital archives, formulate contingency plans, and wrestle with how to protect what matters most in a fragile world. The specific fears have new names, but the fundamental human question remains unchanged. What are we willing to build to ensure continuity? Challenges us to consider the nature of our own preparations. Is our focus solely on individual security, or does it encompass the communal bonds that make survival meaningful? The Silent City suggests that the most enduring refuge is not just a place, but a promise, a shared commitment to carry each other through the long night. It stands as an eternal reminder that even in the face of the unthinkable, human ingenuity, fueled by communal love and stubborn hope, can carve a future from the deepest dark. If this journey into the heart of human resilience resonated with you, consider subscribing for more explorations of history's greatest enigmas. And we would love to hear your perspective in the comments below. If you were to prepare for an uncertain tomorrow, what one element of community or culture would you consider most essential to preserve?